Your doctor is not lying to you, but the number they are watching is the wrong number. And in the space between the number they watch and the number where damage actually begins, most people over 65 spend years quietly, without knowing, while something happens to their kidneys, their heart, their brain, and their eyes that will never fully reverse. I need to tell you something about how medical thresholds work. The threshold your doctor watches is not the threshold where damage begins. It is the threshold where your doctor is legally required to tell you something is wrong. Those are two very different numbers, and nobody ever explains that to you. That distinction is what this video is about. My name is Dr. Eleanor Hayes. 28 years as Chief of Geriatric Medicine. Over 12,000 patients examined past the age of 65. And I have watched the same conversation happen thousands of times. A patient comes in, blood work comes back. Doctor scans the page. Your blood sugar is 110. Totally normal. See you next year. The patient leaves relieved, and the damage continues. Edward was 72 when he first came to see me. Retired electrician. The kind of man who fixed things, built things, showed up. His granddaughter had just asked him to build her a treehouse. He had said yes. He had not told her he was not sure he had the energy to finish it anymore. His last blood work, fasting glucose 114. His doctor's note, within normal range. Edward, I said, how long has your number been in this range? He thought about it. Maybe 6 or 7 years, he said. It has always been normal. 6 years. At a level his doctor called normal. I ran 4 additional tests his doctor had never ordered. By the time I finished, I understood why Edward had been waking up 3 times a night to urinate for 2 years, why his vision had shifted, why his feet felt different than they used to. His kidneys were already at 64% function, from a blood sugar number his doctor called normal. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you is not about diabetes. Most people with this problem will never be diagnosed with diabetes. That is the point. This is about what happens before the diagnosis, in the space between normal and dangerous, where nobody is watching. And I need to warn you about marker number 2, because that one has been happening to someone watching this every single night, in the dark, without a single symptom. Stay with me. Before I show you the 4 markers, you need to understand one thing. The standard fasting blood glucose test measures one thing only. How much sugar is floating in your blood right now after 8 hours of not eating? It does not measure what your cells do with sugar after you eat. It does not measure how efficiently your muscles absorb glucose. It does not measure what your insulin is doing between meals. It does not measure the inflammation your blood sugar is creating in your blood vessel walls every single day. One number, taken once a year, after 8 hours of fasting, and your doctor uses that single number to tell you everything is fine. Marker number 1, your post-meal glucose response. This is the number nobody measures. This is the number that matters most. When you eat a meal, your blood sugar rises. In a metabolically healthy person over 65, it peaks within 30 to 45 minutes and returns to baseline within 90 minutes. In a person with early insulin resistance, a condition that precedes diabetes by a decade or more, it peaks higher and stays elevated longer, sometimes 200 or above, for 2 hours or more, every meal, every day. A study from Oxford University tracked post-meal blood sugar responses in adults over 60. The ones whose blood sugar regularly spiked above 180 after meals showed arterial wall thickening at a rate nearly double those who stayed below 140. Not diabetics, not pre-diabetics. People with normal fasting blood sugar, whose post-meal response was silently damaging their arteries after every single meal. Here is your test for marker 1. A continuous glucose monitor costs about $35 at most pharmacies. No prescription needed. Wear it for 2 weeks. Eat your normal meals. Watch what happens in the 90 minutes after you eat. If you consistently spike above 160, that is a number your doctor has never seen, because your doctor has never asked for it. And here is what Edward did about it. He changed the order in which he ate, not what he ate, just the order. Protein and fat first, vegetables second, carbohydrates last. This single change reduces the post-meal glucose spike by an average of 42%, according to a study from Cornell University. Edward's post-meal spikes dropped from consistent 170s to consistent 120s without eating differently, just in a different order. But marker 1 is not the one that stopped me cold. Marker number 2 is, because this one happens every single night, in every bedroom, while you are completely unconscious and you cannot feel it. Marker number 2, what happens to your blood sugar while you sleep? Between 3 and 8 in the morning, your body releases a surge of hormones, cortisol, glucagon, growth hormone, to prepare you for waking. These hormones tell your liver to release glucose into your bloodstream. In a metabolically healthy person, insulin manages this release smoothly. In a person with early insulin resistance, the liver releases too much glucose, and the insulin response is too slow. So your blood sugar rises while you sleep, not from eating, not from stress, from your own liver, every single night. A process you cannot feel and cannot stop without knowing it is there. Dorothy was 69 when she came to see me. Her fasting glucose was 97. Her doctor was pleased. "You are doing great, Dorothy." I asked her to do one thing. Set an alarm for 3 a.m. Wake up. Check her blood sugar. She came back a week later. Her 3 a.m. reading was 141. By 7 a.m., it had dropped back to 97. Normal. Dorothy's blood sugar was hitting 141 every night while she slept, while her liver quietly flooded her bloodstream with glucose for 5 hours, while her doctor told her everything was fine. She had been doing this for years, and here is what Dorothy did about it. She stopped eating after 7 p.m. Not a diet, not a restriction, just a window. Kitchen closed at 7 every night. And within 8 weeks, her 3 a.m. reading dropped from 141 to 112. Her liver was no longer flooding her system for 5 hours every night. One change. No prescription. No hospital. Marker number 3. And this is the one that changes everything you think you know about your blood work. Your HbA1c, the 3-month average blood sugar your doctor occasionally tests, has a threshold of 5.7. Below 5.7, normal. Above 5.7, pre-diabetic. Your doctor watches that number. But a Harvard study followed 6,000 adults for 15 years. People whose HbA1c stayed between 5.2 and 5.6, fully inside the normal range, showed a measurably higher rate of cardiovascular events than those below 5.2, not 5.7, not 5.6, 5.2. The threshold your doctor watches is not the threshold where damage begins. It is the threshold where your doctor is legally required to tell you something is wrong. And in the space between those two numbers, most people spend years thinking they are fine. Marker number 4, fasting insulin. This is the test almost no doctor orders. Your fasting blood sugar tests the glucose. Your fasting insulin tests the machinery managing that glucose. And here is the critical thing: insulin resistance, the condition that leads to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and accelerated aging, begins with the insulin, not the glucose. Years before your blood sugar moves at all, your insulin is already working overtime, pumping out double or triple what it should need to manage a normal meal. Your glucose looks fine because your insulin is compensating, until one day it cannot compensate anymore, and the glucose number finally moves, and your doctor says, you are pre-diabetic. By that point, the insulin has been struggling for 5 to 10 years. The damage has been accumulating for 5 to 10 years, and your doctor is only now seeing it because the glucose number finally crossed the legal line. Fasting insulin is a simple blood test. Ask your doctor to add it to your next panel. Say, I would like a fasting insulin level with my blood work. Normal fasting insulin, below 10 microunits per milliliter. Above 15, early insulin resistance, likely present for years. Above 25, significant resistance, immediate action needed. Edward's fasting insulin was 31. His fasting glucose was 114. His doctor had never ordered the insulin test. And here is what Edward added to the 2 changes he had already made. He walked for 10 minutes after his 2 largest meals. Not 30 minutes, not a workout, 10 minutes. A walk after eating activates the large muscle groups in the legs, which absorb glucose directly from the bloodstream without requiring insulin. And before his largest meal of the day, he added 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water. The acetic acid in vinegar slows the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream after eating. Studies from Arizona State University show a consistent 12 to 30% reduction in post-meal glucose spikes. Not a supplement, not a prescription. Vinegar and water before dinner. 6 months later, Edward came back. His fasting insulin down from 31 to 14. And his post-meal spikes consistently below 140. His kidney function stable, no further decline. His 3 a.m. blood sugar 104. He looked at me and said something I will not forget. Nobody ever explained it this way. They just kept saying your numbers are normal. Then he said, I finished the treehouse 2 weeks ago. My granddaughter thinks I built it just for her. I did not tell her I also built it for me. Here is what I need you to do this week. Call your doctor's office and ask to add 2 things to your next blood work: fasting insulin level and a 2-hour post-meal glucose test. Buy a continuous glucose monitor and wear it for 2 weeks. Start eating protein before carbohydrates at every meal. Walk 10 minutes after lunch and dinner. These are not treatments. They are measurements. You cannot fix what you cannot see. My father's fasting blood sugar was 112. Normal, his doctor said. See you next year. I was standing in the room. I was the person who spends every working day measuring exactly what that number means. And I did not ask for a single additional test. I said, "That is good, Dad. Normal is good." He died 2 years later. His kidneys had been at 58% for at least 4 years. Nobody had ever checked, including me. Edward's kidneys were at 64%, from a number his doctor called normal. Dorothy's blood vessels were thickening every night, from a number her doctor never measured. Your blood work came back normal. Now you know what normal means and what it does not.